Skinny spazoid. Lucky Luciano is as pivotal a name as any when talking about the Italian Cosa Nostra. He was a revolutionary in the mafia that brought about tremendous profits for people involved. Luciano's cleaning up of a lot of the violence in the mob, with violence, and involvement in World War II have made him into what many people during the time of his life considered to be a great hero who deserved a medal from the US government. Luciano lived the life of New York's #1 gangster and was undoubtedly one of the most powerful men in Cosa Nostra history. Number 10. Beginnings under Arnold Rothstein. Luciano began as a youngster under Arnold Rothstein, a gangster famous for fixing the 1919 World Series. This gave Luciano access to Rothstein's Tammany Hall connections. The friends and associates that Luciano made during this time included Frank Costello, Albert Anastasia, who also became the most powerful mobsters in New York later in their lives. Number 9. Movie that was never made. Luciano in his old age wanted to have a Hollywood film made of him. This posed issues with other Cosa Nostra members because they did not want Luciano to expose it. Luciano wanted the film to be made anyways and met with producer Martin Gauche about the film. He died after this meeting of a heart attack. He also was being followed at the time by the Secret Service. Number 8. Sicilian Advantage. Luciano was known to be able to associate himself with non-Italians, including Jews and the Irish. However, Luciano himself was Sicilian, which gave him an advantage in the mob as they tried to keep everyone Sicilian, who were the major bosses. Mobsters like Mayor Lansky were never officially mob bosses because of this, but were close associates of Luciano. Number 7. Sophistication. Luciano wanted to increase the functionality of the mob exponentially, treating it like a business. Some of the things he ran and improved in the mob included bootlegging, prostitution, gambling, extortion, bookmaking, drug trafficking, loan sharking, controlling labor unions, controlling the Manhattan waterfront, garbage hauling, construction, the garment district business, and trucking. Number 6. Successive Cohorts. During his rise to power, Luciano and his cohorts became very powerful. His cohort Bugsy Siegel lived a lavish life in Hollywood. Mayor Lansky ran a casino in Cuba. Albert Anastasia was the head of assassin group Murder Incorporated, and Frank Costello lived a lavish life in New York, where he controlled many of New York's politicians. Number 5. Life in Italy and Cuba. After he was in jail, Luciano was not allowed to go to the US by law. This is why he lived the remainder of his life mostly in Italy. Luciano moved to Cuba for a brief period as it is near New York and was a haven for the mob. After a while, Luciano was kicked out of Cuba by the government, but not before he had the famous Havana Conference. These meetings were important as Luciano was still very much the boss of his sect of the Cosa Nostra, even when he was in jail for prostitution. Number 4. Murder of Joe Masseria. Joe Masseria was exactly the kind of boss Luciano wanted to do away with, hogging a lot of the power to himself, whereas Luciano tried to empower everyone in the mob and keep it together in this way. The two had dinner at an Italian restaurant where Luciano let loose his goons, who killed Masseria. There are many accounts of this event that are possibly romanticized. Most famously is that Masseria was holding the ace of spades in his hand as he died, a card signifying death. Number 3. Murder of Bugsy Siegel. Once good friends, Luciano was pressured to give the word on killing Bugsy Siegel for not being able to deliver profits from his casino to investors. Luciano gave the word to kill Siegel, his longtime associate. The shooting of Siegel was so brutal that his eye popped out of his socket. Number 2. Helped out the Allies in World War II. In World War II, the U.S. Allies collaborated with the Mafia in order to gain advantages in the invasion of Italy. The connection that they had in order to pull this off was none other than Lucky Luciano. It is debated how useful this connection with him was, however, taking into account that the U.S. government let out its most notorious gangster from jail, it was almost certainly extremely useful. Number 1. The creation of the 5 families and the National Crime Syndicate. The longest-lasting achievement of Luciano was one that lasted even years after his death, which was the creation of the 5 families and the National Crime Syndicate. Before Luciano, there were not clear boundaries or rules that people followed in the New York Mafia. Luciano set up a division of power between different families and organized structures in those families that people respected. Also, the National Crime Syndicate was created as an extension of this system, which included out-of-state mafia and the mob related to different ethnicities such as Jewish and Irish.